The air was thick with silence, broken only by the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional whispered condolences. Agent Riley Morrison stood rigid, her military uniform immaculate, the medals and insignias catching the muted light. 25 years old, yet carrying the weight of a legacy far older than herself. She was here for her father, her hero, but somehow she felt invisible. Around her, family members murmured behind cupped hands, their eyes darting not toward her but past her. Whispers floated like ghosts, sharp and cold. Fingers pointed discreetly, conversations halting as she approached, as if her presence unsettled them. The woman she once called mother avoided her gaze, eyes hollow, almost icy. There was no warmth in that look, only something distant, as if Riley had become a stranger. Her cousins, aunts, uncles all wore the same expression, disappointment. Not grief, not sorrow, but judgment. The kind that stings deeper than loss. Riley's chest tightened, a mix of heartache and confusion swirling inside her. How could they turn their backs now, when she was standing here, in the uniform that symbolized everything her father had fought for? She scanned the crowd again, searching for a flicker of recognition, a hint of understanding, but the weight pressing down on her was suffocating. The man they mourned had been a legend in the CIA, a man of secrets, sacrifice, and shadowed victories. Yet here, in this moment of farewell, his daughter was treated like an outsider. Her military career was not just a choice. It was a bridge to her father's world, a world her family seemed unwilling to accept her into. Maybe they resented what she represented: duty, discipline, a life lived in service to a cause bigger than themselves. Maybe they saw her uniform as a betrayal, a sign she had chosen a path too different from theirs. The ache in her heart grew heavier with every sideways glance. She felt the sting of isolation at a moment when she needed connection the most. The funeral procession moved slowly, the priest's words echoing faintly, but Riley barely heard them. Her thoughts were elsewhere, caught between mourning a man she loved and navigating a family that no longer seemed to love her back. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a shift. A figure stepped forward from the shadows that clung to the edge of the gathering. Tall, composed, commanding attention without a word. The CIA director. The man who had been her father's closest confidant, his most trusted ally. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a path. All eyes turned to the director as he made his way toward Riley. The murmurs ceased. The weight of judgment lifted slightly, replaced by a curious hush. The director stopped before her, his gaze steady and piercing. "Agent Morrison," he said, his voice low but resolute, "your orders." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound, not a question, not an invitation, a summons. In that moment, everything shifted. The coldness in her mother's eyes, the disappointment on her relatives' faces, it all faded into the background. The legacy her father had left was not just a memory buried beneath the soil. It was alive, demanding that she step forward, that she claim her place. Riley straightened her shoulders, the weight on her chest replaced by something new: purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and secrets, but it was hers to walk. Before we jump back in, tell me where you're tuning in from. If this story touches you, if the weight of family and duty resonates, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special just for you. The whispered conversations. The eulogy begins, but the words feel distant, like echoes from a place I'm not allowed to enter. The room is filled with voices, but not the kind I want to hear. Instead, I catch fragments, whispers that slice sharper than any blade. Not the career Dad hoped for. Always thought she should have done something safer. What's she even doing in the military? Not like him. Each phrase hangs in the air, heavy with judgment. I'm here in my uniform, standing straight, trying to hold myself together. But they see only the uniform, not the daughter beneath it. Their eyes flicker over me, cold, skeptical, disappointed. She should have been a doctor, like Aunt Marie said. Or maybe follow the family business, like Uncle Frank suggested. Instead, she chose danger, chose the unknown. My heart clenches. I remember Dad's smile the day I enlisted. It was a rare moment. a quiet pride shining through his usual reserved demeanor. He told me, "You've got your own path, Riley. Make it count." That memory is a small flame against the chill of their voices now. But the whispers don't stop. They weave through the crowd like a thread of doubt, pulling at my confidence. She's chasing ghosts in the shadows, not real life. Quote, "Dad would have wanted her safe, not lost in some secret war." I want to shout back. To tell them they don't know the battles I fight every day, that this uniform isn't just fabric. It's my armor, my promise to him, to myself. Their eyes meet mine briefly, some filled with pity, others with thinly veiled contempt, and I realize this isn't just about my choices. It's about their own fears, their own regrets projected onto me. I am alone here, surrounded by family but isolated in my truth. Then the memories flood in. Dad's steady hands gripping mine as I left for basic training. His voice, low but firm. "Be smart, be brave, be you." Those words echo louder than the murmurs around me. I think of the times he defended me quietly, slipping a note in my bag that said, "Keep going." The moments when he stood up to their criticisms, silently but fiercely. Now I feel the weight of their disapproval like 1,000 stones pressing down. But beneath it all, a fire ignites. I won't let their doubts define me. I will prove them wrong. Not just for Dad, but for me. The room feels colder, the whispers fading as my resolve grows. I stand taller, the uniform a symbol of every sacrifice, every hard choice. Then, through the crowd, someone approaches. His expression is urgent, calm, but impossible to ignore. "Agent Morrison," he says quietly, yet with authority. "Your orders." In that moment, everything shifts. The whispers, the judgments, the pain, they all fall away. Because this is not just about a funeral. It's about a mission. A purpose greater than any doubt. I nod, swallowing the lump in my throat. The world outside this room waits for me, and I am ready. For Dad, for myself, for the future I will carve with my own hands. "Agent Morrison, your orders," he repeats. And I answer, not with words, but with the steady breath of someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's meant to do. The unexpected offer. The room was thick with silence, heavy with the weight of grief and unspoken tension. Faces bowed, whispers barely audible. And yet, through it all, Riley stood apart. Her presence overlooked, her voice unheard. She was dressed in her military uniform, a stark reminder of her own journey. But here, at her father's funeral, it felt like she was just a shadow in the background. Ignored. Invisible. Then, from the corner of the room, a tall figure approached. The CIA director, a man whose reputation alone could command a room, stepped forward with measured steps. The murmur ceased. Eyes turned, some with surprise, others with guarded curiosity. But Riley's heart pounded loudly, drowning out everything else. He stopped a few feet away from her, his gaze steady, almost piercing. "Agent Morrison," he said, voice low but clear, "your father left me a message for you." Riley blinked, stunned. She hadn't expected this. Not here, not now. The director continued, "He believed in you, more than anyone else in this room. More than you might even believe in yourself." Riley's breath caught. Her father had been a man of few words, even fewer sentiments shared openly. To hear this from the director felt surreal. He wanted you to know that your potential, it's not just in your blood, it's in your choices. In the way you carry yourself. In the way you've trained. In the way you've served. Riley's mind raced, memories flashing. Her father's stern lectures, his rare moments of pride, the way he had always pushed her to be more than just his daughter. The director's voice softened. He wanted you to take his place, not just as his daughter, but as an agent, a protector, a guardian in the shadows where the world's safety is decided. Riley's eyes widened. The world she had known, the structured, disciplined life in the military, was about to intersect with something far more complex and far more dangerous. "You carry his legacy," the director said. "But this is your path now. The world is changing. Threats are growing. Tensions are rising. We need someone who understands both the battlefield and the unseen war." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Your orders, Agent Morrison, are to step forward. to embrace what your father believed you could be, to become the agent he always knew you were destined to be. Riley swallowed hard, a mixture of shock, fear, and a stirring sense of purpose flooding through her. She had spent years forging her own identity, separate from her father's shadow. Yet here it was, an unexpected offer, a call to a future she hadn't dared to imagine. The path was uncertain, the stakes impossibly high. But beneath the doubt, a spark ignited. A spark of hope. A spark of determination. The director's words echoed in her mind long after he stepped away. Your orders, quote. She saw her father's face. Not just the man who had been her parent, but the agent who had sacrificed everything, the man who believed in a cause greater than himself. Riley's hands clenched at her sides. This was no longer just about mourning a loss. It was about honoring a legacy, about forging a future. She pictured herself in the field, not just as a soldier, but as a covert operative, navigating a world of shadows, secrets, and danger, a world where every decision could tip the balance. She thought about the rising tensions worldwide, the fragile peace that could shatter with a single misstep. The urgency was real, and so was the responsibility. Riley took a deep breath. The weight of the moment pressed down, but it did not crush her. Instead, it steeled her resolve. She was ready to step into the unknown, to carry her father's name with pride, to write her own story. The director's voice still lingered in the room. Agent Morrison, your orders. And for the first time since the funeral began, Riley felt seen, heard, empowered. She nodded, a quiet promise to herself and to the man who had believed in her all along. Her journey was just beginning. Reactions and realizations. The funeral was winding down. The soft murmur of prayers and quiet sobs filled the room. But I felt invisible, like a ghost standing in the corner. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Dad's casket, on each other, on the memories they held close. But not on me. Not on Riley Morrison, the daughter who stood there in her military uniform, proud and determined. I tried to catch my mother's gaze, hoping for a flicker of understanding. Instead, I saw disappointment. My family wasn't just mourning Dad. They were mourning the choices I'd made, the path I had chosen, the path they feared. My uncle's voice cut through the silence, laced with bitterness. Riley, this isn't the time or place for your CIA nonsense. His words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cold. You think dressing up in that uniform makes you some kind of hero? You're just chasing danger. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. I swallowed hard. I wanted to scream, to tell him he didn't know a thing about my dreams. But the weight of the room pressed down on me. Still, I stood tall, my jaw set with stubborn resolve. My choices aren't about danger, I said quietly but firmly. They're about purpose, about protecting people, about carrying on what Dad believed in, doing what's right, even when it's hard. Quote. My aunt shook her head, disbelief etched in her features. Protecting people? You're walking into a world full of lies, Riley. Spies, secrets, betrayals. It's not safe. Not for you. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they came from people who should have believed in me. I looked around the room, searching for an ally, a sign that I wasn't alone. That's when I noticed him, the CIA director. He had been quietly observing, a steady presence at the edge of the gathering. He stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Agent Morrison, your orders are clear. You're entrusted with a mission that requires courage, integrity, and resilience beyond what most can imagine. Your family's fears are understandable, but they don't define your future. The room fell silent. His endorsement was like a lifeline thrown into the storm. I felt a surge of strength. The director's words weren't just official. They were personal. They reminded me why I had chosen this path, why I couldn't turn back. My mother's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of fear and love. She took a hesitant step toward me, her voice trembling. Riley, I'm scared. Scared for you. The CIA. It's a dangerous world. You're my daughter. I don't want to lose you to some shadowy war one don't understand. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. Mom, I know you're scared. I am too. But this isn't about danger alone. It's about making a difference. About honoring Dad's memory by being brave in my own way. Her grip tightened, and for a moment I saw the woman who had raised me, the one who had always fought to keep me safe. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back. I nodded, my voice soft but unwavering. I promise. But I won't let fear stop me. Not now. Not ever. The tension in the room shifted. The anger and skepticism hadn't disappeared, but a new understanding had begun to take root. I wasn't just the rebellious daughter anymore. I was Agent Morrison, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the last of the mourners began to leave, I stood beside the CIA director. His presence was a silent vow. I was not alone in this fight. The path ahead would be filled with challenges, doubt, danger, and sacrifice, but I was ready. I had to be, because this was more than a career. It was my calling, my legacy, my mission, and I would not be ignored again. The decision. The house was quiet the moment Riley stepped inside. The echoes of the funeral still clung to the air, whispers of loss, hushed condolences, the heavy silence of things left unsaid. She set her bag down slowly, her military uniform rustling softly against the old wood floor. Every step took her deeper into memories wrapped in shadows. Around her, relics of her father's life filled the room, medals glinting faintly in the dim light, worn photographs, faded letters folded neatly in a box on the shelf. Each item was a story, a fragment of a man who had given everything to his country, a man who, despite the crowd that day, had never truly been ignored by her. Sitting on the edge of the couch, Riley let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The funeral had been a storm of faces, some familiar, many strangers. Yet in that sea of mourners, she had felt invisible. Her presence, her grief, even her identity as his daughter, seemed to slip past them unnoticed. It was as if the weight of her loss was lost on those around her. And then, there was the moment that changed everything. The CIA director's voice had cut through the silence like a beacon. Agent Morrison, your orders. Those words had landed with the force of a command, but beneath them was something more profound. A call, a recognition, a promise. Riley's mind drifted back to that day, the clarity of the director's gaze, the unspoken acknowledgement of her potential, and the path now laid before her. The offer to step into a legacy far greater than mourning, a chance to honor her father not just with memory, but with action. But the decision wasn't simple. Her family's expectations loomed large, quiet hopes and unspoken fears entwined with tradition and the weight of what was expected of her. They wanted her to grieve, to heal, to find safety in their shared sorrow. To them, the idea of following in her father's footsteps was a burden too heavy, a path too dangerous. Yet inside her, a fire was growing. The lessons her father had taught her over the years came rushing back. Bravery in the face of fear, sacrifice for the greater good, the courage to stand when the world expected her to fall. Those lessons weren't just words. They were a legacy, a compass pointing her toward a future that was hers to claim. She reached out, fingers brushing over a photograph of her father in uniform. His eyes, steady and resolute, seemed to look back at her with pride and trust. He believed in me, she thought. He always did. The urge to accept the director's offer wasn't just about duty. It was about purpose. About transforming grief into strength, loss into resolve. To carry forward the mission her father had started, to become the agent he always knew she could be. But doubt lingered. The weight of what this choice meant pressed down on her chest. Could she live up to the legacy? Could she balance her own dreams with the expectations of those she loved? The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous. Still, as the evening deepened, clarity began to take root. This was more than a choice. It was a vow. "I will do this," she whispered to the empty room, her voice steady and sure. "Not just for him. For me, for all of us." The grief that had threatened to drown her found new shape, a fierce, burning determination. She was no longer the overlooked daughter at a funeral. She was Agent Morrison, ready to step into the shadows, to face the unknown with courage, and to write her own story. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a steady guide. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's standing tall despite it. Sacrifice means giving what's needed, not what's easy. Riley stood, her reflection catching her eye in the mirror. The uniform fit her now. Not just a symbol of service, but a mantle of resolve. She straightened her shoulders, the weight of the past balanced by the promise of the future. As she prepared to answer the call, a sense of peace settled over her. The path ahead would be hard. It would test every part of her, but she would walk it with the strength of her father's legacy behind her and the certainty that she was ready. "Agent Morrison," the director had said. Those words were no longer just a summons. They were her orders, and she would follow them, no matter where they led. Tonight, grief became purpose, loss became mission. And Riley Morrison, once ignored, found her voice and her destiny. Training begins. The first morning of training hit Riley like a storm. The sun was barely up, but the base was already alive with the sound of boots pounding the pavement, commands shouted sharp and fast. She stood in her military uniform, heart racing, every muscle tense. This was it. The world she'd only glimpsed before was now her reality. The air was thick with intensity. Faces around her were set like stone, eyes burning with focus. Some recruits exchanged quick nods or curt, guarded smiles. Others stared straight ahead, lost in their own thoughts. Riley felt like an outsider, a ghost from a life that had just ended, still raw from the silence she'd felt at her father's funeral. Ignored. Invisible. But here, invisibility wasn't an option. Her first drill instructor barked orders with a voice that cut through the cold morning air. "Move! Faster! No excuses!" Riley pushed forward, muscles screaming, lungs burning. Every obstacle was a test, every command a challenge to her will. She stumbled, caught herself, and kept going. The pain was familiar. Like grief, it dug deep, but also sharpened her resolve. Among the recruits, she noticed a few faces that stood out. There was Malik, tall and steady, who spoke quietly about his years in the Special Forces before this. Lena, whose sharp eyes missed nothing, carried the weight of a family she barely saw anymore. And Javier, the Joker, who used humor to mask his own battles. Each had a story, a reason for being here. Riley felt the first flicker of connection, a fragile thread weaving them together. Training wasn't just physical. The mental trials came swiftly. Puzzles, codes, simulations that demanded every ounce of focus and creativity. During a late-night session, Riley sat hunched over a complex encryption problem, frustration mounting. Doubt crept in. Could she really do this? Was she cut out for a world that had always seemed so distant? But then she heard it, her father's voice, not in sound but in spirit. He had taught her resilience, the quiet strength to stand when everything else falls away. She remembered the funeral, the cold shoulders, the ignored presence. And she let that loneliness fuel her fire. This time, she wouldn't be invisible. Day by day, the training pushed her to her limits. Early runs became sprints. Simple drills turned into endurance tests. Riley learned to read the subtle cues in a room, to anticipate moves before they happened. The physical scars were badges of honor, the mental strains, a crucible forging her into something new. There were moments when the pressure cracked her armor. She'd catch her breath in the corner of the barracks, hands shaking, mind racing with fears she rarely admitted. But then a teammate's hand on her shoulder, a shared nod after a brutal exercise, reminded her she wasn't alone. Camaraderie bloomed in the harshest places. One afternoon, after a grueling obstacle course, Malik caught up with her. "You're holding back," he said simply. "What's stopping you?" Quote. Riley hesitated, then spoke quietly. "At my dad's funeral, no one saw me. I was there, but it was like I didn't exist. I'm not about to let that happen again." Malik nodded, respect in his eyes. "Then show them who you really are." That night, Riley lay awake, replaying every moment. The funeral silence had been a wound, but it was also a call to arms. Here, in this intense, demanding world, she was carving out her own space, demanding to be seen. The montage of training days unfolded. Dawn runs through misty fields, classroom sessions cracking codes under fluorescent lights, hand-to-hand combat drills leaving bruises blooming like dark flowers. Riley's movements grew sharper, her decisions faster. The quiet girl who had stood forgotten was becoming a force. In one particularly tough session, the instructors staged a simulated hostage extraction. Riley's team hesitated, the weight of what was at stake pressing down. But she stepped forward, voice steady, issuing orders with the confidence she was still building. The team moved as one, executing the plan flawlessly. Afterward, the lead instructor gave a rare nod of approval. "Agent Morrison, you're ready to lead." The words hit her like a wave. Not just a recruit anymore, not a shadow from a funeral. She was someone they counted on. Through every challenge, every setback, Riley found strength in the memory of her father. His quiet courage, the sacrifices no one acknowledged, became the foundation beneath her feet. She wasn't just training to survive. She was training to honor him, to carry forward a legacy no one else had seen. The CIA world was ruthless, demanding, unforgiving, but Riley Morrison was learning to meet it head-on. The girl who was ignored was becoming a woman who commanded attention. And as the training days blurred into weeks, one truth became clear. This was just the beginning. The orders from the CIA director weren't just instructions, they were a call to action. Riley was ready to answer. The first mission. The room was cold, sterile, a far cry from the warmth I had imagined in my first real assignment. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as my heart pounded louder than the steady breathing of the agents surrounding me. Every face was focused, eyes sharp, voices low but loaded with urgency. This was the briefing room where my future would be decided. I stood in my military uniform, the fabric tight around my shoulders, the insignia on my chest feeling heavier than usual. Not because of the cloth, but because of the weight of what came before me. My father's legacy pressed down on me like a shadow I couldn't shake. He was a legend in this line of work, unseen but always felt, and now it was my turn. Despite years of training, the nerves clawed inside me. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself this was what I was made for. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of not living up to the name Morrison. Scared that the world wouldn't notice if I disappeared. The last time I felt this invisible was at Dad's funeral. Surrounded by people who had known him longer than I had, I was a ghost in the crowd. Whispers and sideways glances. Eyes that didn't meet mine. I was the daughter of a man everyone revered, yet no one seemed to acknowledge me. Not until the CIA director, his voice cutting through the silence, said, "Agent Morrison, your orders." That moment changed everything. Now, years later, those words echoed in my mind like a beacon. I was no longer just his daughter. I was an agent, a Morrison in my own right. The director's briefing was precise. The mission: infiltrate a clandestine network operating across borders. A web of deception threatening global stability. Intelligence had pinpointed a key figure. Someone who held the strings to a dangerous operation. Extracting information from this target was critical. Failure was not an option. The team around me was a blend of seasoned operatives and new recruits. Their eyes flicked to me, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. To them, I was the rookie, the one with a famous name but untested skill. The briefing officer spoke clearly, outlining the objectives. Agent Morrison, your role is infiltration and extraction. You will be embedded deep within the target's circle. You'll need to gain their trust, identify vulnerabilities, and secure the intelligence. Extraction points are limited. Timing is critical. Backup is limited. I nodded, taking it all in. The weight of responsibility settled deeper. This wasn't just about me. It was about protecting lives, upholding the mission my father had dedicated his life to, and proving that I belonged here. As the meeting wrapped up, the director approached. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "Agent Morrison," he said, voice low but firm. "Remember, your training has prepared you for this. Trust your instincts. We're counting on you." I swallowed hard, feeling the gravity of his words. Back in my quarters, I stared at my reflection. The uniform was immaculate, but my eyes betrayed the turmoil inside. What if I'm not ready? The thought gnawed at me. What if I fail and disappoint everyone? But then, I thought of Dad, of the sacrifices he made, of the silent strength he showed when no one was watching. I thought of the moment at his funeral, when the world ignored me, but the director didn't. He saw potential where others saw a shadow. Drawing a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders. This was my moment. Fear was natural, but it wouldn't define me. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Equipment checks, intelligence reviews, communication protocols. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. I memorized the code names, the extraction routes, the faces I'd have to meet. Doubt lurked in the corners of my mind, but so did determination. As I stepped onto the transport vehicle that would take me into the field, the cool night air hit my face. The city lights blurred behind me, fading into the unknown. My heart raced, not just from adrenaline, but from the realization that I was finally stepping into the story I was meant to write. The mission ahead was dangerous. The stakes were life and death. But beneath the fear was a spark, a fierce hope that I could honor my father's legacy, not by living in his shadow, but by forging my own path. "Agent Morrison," the voice crackled through the comms. "You are clear to proceed. Good luck." I nodded, even though no one could see me. With one last breath, I crossed the threshold into the uncertain, ready to face whatever awaited. This was more than a mission. It was my proving ground. And I was ready. On the ground. The city hums with life. A sprawling maze of voices, footsteps, and distant engines. Riley moves through the crowd, her uniform blending with the rhythm of the streets, every step measured, every breath controlled. The air is thick with the scent of spices and exhaust, the chatter of strangers weaving around her like invisible threads. Yet, she remains unseen, an agent trained to navigate chaos without leaving a trace. Her eyes scan every corner, every shadow. A vendor calls out, children dart past, a bus roars by. The noise is overwhelming, but Riley's mind is razor sharp. Each detail matters. The cracked pavement beneath her boots, the flicker of a surveillance camera, the hurried glance of a man in a dark jacket, all pieces of a puzzle she must solve. She recalls her father's voice, steady and unwavering, echoing in her mind. "You have the strength, Riley, strength that doesn't come from muscle or firepower, but from knowing who you are. Trust yourself." At the funeral, those words felt distant, drowned out by the cold shoulders and whispered dismissals. No one had looked her way. No one had expected her to stand tall. But here, now, in the heart of this foreign city, she feels something shift. She moves with purpose, slipping through alleys and crossing busy plazas, each step a testament to her training. The mission is clear, but the path is anything but. Suddenly, a blockade, a group of guards, unexpected and unyielding, bar her way. Her pulse quickens, but her face remains calm. Instinct takes over. She merges into the crowd, her presence dissolving like smoke, weaving through gaps, using the chaos as a shield. A flash of memory cuts through the tension, her father's eyes, sharp and proud. "Agent Morrison," the CIA director had said at the funeral, his voice breaking the silence that had swallowed her. "Your orders." Those words weren't just an assignment. They were a call to rise above grief, to claim her place. Riley's fingers tighten around the folded note she carries. A set of coordinates, a name, a time, every detail etched into her mind. The stakes are high. Failure isn't an option. She rounds a corner and freezes. Two men block the narrow street ahead, their posture aggressive. Her breath slows, time slows. But she is ready. She calculates. They expect a direct approach. She will not give them that. A sudden diversion, a dropped wallet, a sharp cry from a nearby vendor, draws their attention. Riley slips past, heart hammering, but steady. The mission pulses through her veins, steady and sure. At the rendezvous point, she pauses, watching as the target emerges from the shadows. The city's noise dims in her ears. Everything hinges on this moment. Her training, her instincts, her father's legacy, they all converge here. Her hand moves swiftly, signaling the team. The operation unfolds with precision, each move orchestrated like a well-rehearsed dance. When the dust settles, the mission is complete. Success. For the first time since the funeral, Riley allows herself a breath she didn't know she was holding. She is no longer just the daughter they ignored. She is Agent Morrison, capable, confident, unstoppable. And as the city pulses around her, she knows this is only the beginning. The turning point. The room felt colder than it should have. Not because of the weather outside, but because of the silence that settled over everyone else. Everyone except me. I stood there in my military uniform, sharp and proper as my father had always insisted, but invisible. At his funeral, surrounded by people who once called him friend, colleague, or mentor, I was somehow less than a shadow. A daughter, yes. A soldier, yes. But not worthy of a glance, not worthy of a word. I remembered the last time I wore this uniform, standing at attention beside him during his final mission briefing. His voice had been firm, resolute, but kind. "Riley," he said, "being an agent means carrying more than just your orders. It means carrying your honor, your integrity. Never lose sight of that." Now, as the ceremony ended and people shuffled away, whispers trailing behind them like ghosts, I was left with nothing but those words, and a mission that hadn't yet been given. That's when I heard it, calm and deliberate, cutting through the quiet, the CIA director's voice, steady and unmistakable. "Agent Morrison, your orders." The weight of those words hit me harder than any bullet ever could. It wasn't just an assignment, it was a summons, a challenge, a call to step out of the shadows where I had been left and into the light where my father had always stood. I stood straighter, drawing in a breath that tasted of resolve and sorrow. The room was still thick with the scent of loss, but beneath that, a new mission was unfolding. One that wouldn't just test my skills, but my very soul. The files handed to me were terse but clear, a covert operation deep in hostile territory. Innocent lives caught in the crossfire of shadow wars and political chess games. Orders were to proceed with precision, to eliminate threats swiftly and without hesitation. But as I scanned the details, the familiar tug of doubt pulled at me. The mission was critical. Failure was not an option. Yet, somewhere beneath the layers of strategy and secrecy, something didn't sit right. The collateral damage, civilians caught in the blast, was unacceptable. I thought of my father again, not as the legendary agent the world mourned, but as the man who taught me that strength was not just muscle or firepower. Strength was choosing what was right, even when the path was darkest. The dilemma was clear. Follow orders, as drilled into me since my first day in uniform, or act on my conscience to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I closed the folder, the edges crisp beneath my fingers. The weight of the decision pressed down like the cold steel of my weapon. Each heartbeat echoed louder, the ticking of a clock counting down to a choice that could change everything. Was I still his daughter? Was I still an agent? More importantly, was it possible to be both? The room seemed to close in, the faces around me blurring into insignificance. I remembered the look on my father's face when he believed in me, when he saw in me not just a soldier, but a person capable of mercy. The orders were clear, but my conscience screamed louder. I thought about the lives hanging in the balance. Innocent children, families, strangers, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Could I live with the knowledge that I had turned away from them? The director's voice echoed again, pulling me back to the moment. "Agent Morrison, we need your decision." I swallowed hard. The mission was a crucible, and I was standing at its center. To follow blindly was to betray my values. To defy orders was to risk everything, my career, my safety, perhaps even my life. But honor demanded more. I straightened my shoulders, the uniform suddenly feeling less like armor and more like a mantle I was ready to bear. "I'm going to protect them," I said, voice steady, eyes fierce, all of them. A murmur rippled through the room. Some faces betrayed shock, others respect. The director's gaze held a flicker of something I hadn't expected, approval. "Agent Morrison," he said, quietly, "that's a risk, but it's the right one." In that moment, I understood the true essence of being an agent, and being my father's daughter. It wasn't about blind obedience. It was about courage, conviction, and the willingness to stand alone if necessary. The chain reaction began the instant I made my choice. Orders were rewritten, missions recalibrated, lives saved. And in the quiet aftermath, as the world shifted beneath my feet, I found something I thought I'd lost at the funeral: my voice. My mission was no longer just about duty, it was about honor, integrity, the kind of legacy worth fighting for. "Agent Morrison," the director said, a faint smile breaking the usual stoic mask, "welcome to the real fight." I nodded. This was my turning point. And I was ready, facing the consequences. The moment Riley made her choice, she knew the ripples would spread far beyond her. The mission was no longer just a set of orders to follow. It had become a test of her judgment, her values, and her very identity within the agency. What she did was unprecedented, and the consequences hit faster and harder than she expected. She had defied protocol. She had gone against the direct command of higher-ups, and now the weight of that decision was pulling down on her like a storm. When the news broke, the reactions were immediate and mixed. Some called her reckless, accusing her of jeopardizing not only the mission, but the lives of everyone involved. Others whispered in quiet corners, praising the courage it took to stand her ground. But one thing was clear: nobody could ignore what she had done. The debriefing was merciless. Sitting across from a panel of stern faces, Riley felt the cold scrutiny like a physical force. Every action, every choice was dissected. The room was thick with tension. It was not just about her performance, but about the very trust the agency placed in her. "You understand the gravity of your insubordination, Agent Morrison?" the lead officer asked, voice sharp, eyes locked on hers. Riley met the gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir, and I accept full responsibility for my decisions." There was silence for a moment. Then another voice broke through. "Explain why you chose to deviate from the plan." Her answer was steady, unwavering. "Because the plan didn't account for the human cost. I couldn't stand by and watch innocent lives become collateral damage. I knew the risks, but I made the call to protect them." The room shifted. Some frowned, others exchanged looks that hinted at grudging respect. Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a declaration. She wasn't here to plead or apologize. She was here to defend what she believed was right. Outside the walls of that room, the fallout continued. The mission's outcome was scrutinized in reports and meetings. Riley's standing within the agency wavered, her name on some lips with criticism, on others with admiration. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Her team, the people who had trained with her, fought alongside her, and bled with her, stood by her side. They saw beyond the headlines and the whispers. They knew her not just as an agent, but as a leader. One by one, they reached out. Quiet messages of support, subtle nods of solidarity in the hallways, unspoken bonds strengthened in the shared aftermath of a mission gone sideways. "You made the hard call," her closest teammate said softly, "and we follow you because of it." Those words meant more than any official commendation or reprimand. They were a lifeline in a sea of doubt. Riley realized then that leadership wasn't about being infallible. It was about owning the consequences of your choices, standing firm when the world questions you, and inspiring those around you to do the same. The agency might have questioned her judgment, but her team saw the truth in her resolve. They rallied around her, not just because she was their leader on paper, but because she showed them what it meant to lead with conviction. In that moment, the weight of command settled on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle she was ready to bear. And then, out of the blue, came a moment that none of them expected. At her father's funeral, a somber day clouded with grief and silence, Riley stood in her uniform, feeling invisible among the crowd. The whispers, the sidelong glances, they all ignored the girl in the corner, the agent who had just faced everything and come out standing. Then, the room shifted. The CIA director approached, his presence commanding attention. The murmurs died down as he stopped in front of her, eyes steady and voice clear. "Agent Morrison," he said, his tone carrying the weight of authority and something else. "Respect. Your orders." The room held its breath. With those words, the world tilted. The recognition wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was a public acknowledgement that Riley's actions, her courage, and her leadership mattered. The director's words were more than an order. They were a charge, a challenge, and a validation. Riley met his gaze without hesitation. In that instant, the isolation she felt moments before dissolved. She was no longer ignored. She was seen. She was ready. Because leadership, she knew now, was never about the easy path. It was about facing the consequences head-on and owning them with unwavering conviction. The mission had changed her, the agency had challenged her, and her team had embraced her. Now, standing at the crossroads of duty and destiny, Riley Morrison was more than an agent in a uniform. She was a leader, tested, accountable, and unbreakable. Her orders were clear. The future was hers to command. Reconnecting with family. The air was thick with unspoken words. The weight of the past pressed down on the room as Riley stepped through the door. Military uniform crisp, medals catching the dim light. Her family sat around the table, a fragile semblance of normalcy masking the tension beneath. The silence was deafening. No one looked at her. No one said her name. At Dad's funeral, she had been invisible, ignored by those who once claimed to love her. The same silence now stretched between them, a gulf wider than any she'd faced overseas. The mission was over, but the real battle had just begun. She took a deep breath and sat down. Her mother's eyes flickered to her for a moment, then away. Her brother's jaw tightened. The years of absence, the secrets, the lies, they all hung in the air like a storm ready to break. "I know none of this is easy," Riley began, voice steady but soft. "I didn't come home to remind you of pain. I came to tell you the truth." Her father's chair remained empty, a ghost at the table. Riley's chest tightened, but she pushed on. "I was at his funeral. You all saw me there, yet not one of you spoke to me. Not one of you acknowledged what I've become. I was just there, a shadow." Her mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We were grieving, Riley. It wasn't about you." "No," Riley said quietly. "It was about the silence. The refusal to see me as I am now." Her brother's voice broke the quiet. "We don't understand what you do. You never told us." "I couldn't," she admitted. "Not then. Not without risking everything. But I'm not the scared girl you remember. I'm Agent Morrison, and I have orders." The room stiffened. The weight of those words settled over them. "I was given a mission right after Dad's funeral," she continued. "A mission that demanded everything from me. I didn't get to mourn. I didn't get to be your daughter for a moment. Instead, I was pulled into a world you don't know. A world where the stakes are life and death, where loyalty is tested every second." Her mother's voice trembled. "We just wanted you safe." "I know," Riley said, "and I wanted that too, but safe isn't a word I get to use anymore, not in this line of work." Her brother leaned forward, eyes searching. "Then why come home? Why now?" "Because I need you to understand," she said, voice breaking. "I need you to see me, not as the child you lost or the shadow at Dad's funeral, but as who I am now." A long silence followed. Then her mother spoke, voice rough but honest. "We were scared. We didn't know how to reach you. We thought if we ignored the uniform, maybe we could pretend you were still just our little girl." Riley's eyes softened. "I get that. I really do. But pretending doesn't heal wounds. It only deepens them." Her brother nodded slowly. "So what now?" "Now," she said, "we try. We start talking. I'll share what I can. Not all of it, but enough to let you in." Her mother reached out, fingers trembling, and took Riley's hand. "We want to know. We want to be part of your life again." "For the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe that's possible," Riley whispered. The tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a fragile hope. Her brother smiled faintly. "Agent Morrison, we never thought we'd say this, but welcome home." Riley squeezed his hand. "Thank you. I'm not just your daughter. I'm someone who fights for this family, even when you don't see it. Her mother nodded, tears finally falling. We see you now. And in that moment, the walls built by silence and fear started to crumble. The daughter they had ignored was finally heard. The agent they didn't understand was finally embraced. Riley knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles, both outside and within these walls. But tonight, at this table, a bridge was built. A family began to heal. I'm ready, she said softly. Ready to come home. They smiled back, the promise of reconciliation shining in their eyes. For the first time since the funeral, Riley felt the weight lift. Just a little. The mission had changed her, but it hadn't broken her. And now, maybe, it could bring them all back together. Embracing the future. The wind whispered softly through the trees as she stood there, still, steady, in the sharp lines of her military uniform. The grave before her was fresh, the earth unsettled, a quiet testament to a life both fiercely lived and painfully lost. Her heart was heavy, sorrow weighed down her shoulders, but beneath it something else stirred, a quiet pride, a steady flame refusing to be snuffed out. For years, she had been the invisible shadow at the edges of her own family's story. At her father's funeral, no one had looked her way. Their eyes slid past her like she was air, their grief too tightly bound in old wounds and unspoken regrets. The room had been cold, the silence louder than any words could be. She had felt invisible, ignored even, a daughter left out of the narrative, a chapter erased. But then, amid the sea of faces that didn't see her, a voice broke through. Agent Morrison, your orders. Those words were a lifeline. The voice belonged to the CIA director, commanding not just her attention, but her very identity. It was the moment she stopped being a footnote in someone else's story and began writing her own. She had come to understand that grief was not a single emotion, but a tangle, a knot of loss, anger, confusion, and, eventually, acceptance. Standing here now, she let the weight of it settle over her. The sharp sting of absence softened into something she could hold on to. This was her closure. Not the polite nods at a funeral, not the hollow condolences whispered behind hands. This was real. This was hers. Her family was beginning to thaw. Slowly, hesitantly, they were reaching out, not just to her, but to the truth she carried inside. The truth that she was not just the daughter of a man who had shaped her world, but a woman who had forged her own path through the fire of expectation and silence. The uniform she wore was more than fabric. It was a shield and a badge of honor. It told a story of resilience, of late nights and early mornings, of missions that demanded everything and gave back even more. It was a symbol of the role she had claimed for herself: agent, protector, warrior. She thought back to that day, the day she stood in the sterile office of the CIA director, the room charged with unspoken understanding. Where others had seen only a daughter overshadowed by her father's legacy, he saw an agent ready to step forward. His words were clear, commanding, and full of promise. Agent Morrison, your orders. It was a call to action, a declaration that the past did not define her, that her future was hers to command. Now, as she looked out beyond the grave, beyond the pain, she saw the horizon stretching wide and open. The road ahead was uncertain, no doubt. But it was hers to walk, and she would walk it with her head held high. Her role in the CIA was evolving. The missions were tougher, the stakes higher. She was no longer the rookie, the one who had to prove herself over and over. She was a leader now, trusted with secrets, with lives, with the fate of nations. The challenges were immense, but so was her resolve. The weight of her father's absence was still there, but it no longer tethered her to the past. Instead, it fueled her determination. Every decision she made, every step she took, was a tribute to the man who had shaped her, even if he never fully saw her. She carried his lessons with her, the discipline, the courage, the fierce loyalty, but she was no longer living in his shadow. She was her own agent, her own story. The wind lifted her hair, and she closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. The sorrow, the pride, the grief, they all mingled into a singular strength. She was ready. The phone call had come just this morning. The director's voice, steady and commanding, had cut through the silence of her office. Agent Morrison, your orders are to lead the new covert operation in Eastern Europe. Your team is ready. The mission is critical. She had accepted without hesitation. There was no room for doubt, no time for second-guessing. This was what she had trained for. This was who she was. As she turned away from the grave, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. The past had been acknowledged. The future was hers to seize. With every step, she reaffirmed her identity, not just as a daughter, but as an agent, a leader, a force to be reckoned with. She was no longer seeking approval. She was commanding respect. Her journey had been long, fraught with pain and silence, but now it was clear. She belonged here, in this uniform, in this role, in this life. Her father's legacy was not a chain but a foundation, and on it she was building something new, something unbreakable. Standing tall, she whispered to herself, I am Agent Morrison, and I am ready. The future awaited, and she would meet it head-on. Looking forward, the room was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Years ago, at my father's funeral, I stood there, ignored, invisible. The weight of grief pressed down on me, but so did the silence of those around me. I was just a girl then, barely 25, dressed in my military uniform, a symbol of service that somehow felt like a shadow beside the legacy of my father. No one looked my way, no one acknowledged the blood we shared. I was the daughter of a hero, yet I might as well have been a stranger. But then, in that quiet moment, the room shifted. The CIA director stepped forward, his voice cutting through the cold like a beacon. He said simply, Agent Morrison, your orders. Those words changed everything. From that day, I wasn't just a grieving daughter. I was an agent, a witness to my father's life and the secrets he carried, and I was ready to carry the torch. Now, here I stand, years later, leading a team on the edge of a mission that could alter the course of history. The room buzzes with anticipation. The stakes are high, the risks real. But I am no longer the girl who was overlooked. I am the leader my father would have been proud of. Every briefing, every plan, every decision I make is shaped by the journey I've traveled. The doubts I once carried have been replaced by resolve. The silence that once surrounded me has been broken by the steady rhythm of purpose. I think back to those early days, the struggle to be seen, to be heard, the moments when I questioned if I could live up to the name I carry. But with each challenge, I grew stronger. Each failure became a lesson, each triumph a stepping stone. I see flashes of those moments now. The late nights studying intelligence reports, the early mornings running drills, the quiet conversations with mentors who believed in me when others didn't. I remember the sting of being dismissed and the fire that sparked inside me because of it. There was a time I uncovered a lead no one else could follow. The mission that seemed impossible but succeeded because I refused to give up. The trust I earned from my team, built one small victory at a time. These are the building blocks of who I am. And now, as the operation moves forward, I command with confidence. My voice carries authority, my decisions carry weight. The team looks to me not just as their leader, but as someone who understands the gravity of our work and the legacy behind it. Because this isn't just about a mission. It's about honoring a promise made to my father, about carrying forward the values he lived by, courage, integrity, resilience, about proving that even when the world turns its back, you can stand tall and forge your own path. I am Agent Morrison, and I am ready. I look directly into the future, knowing that the road ahead will be tough, but I am no longer afraid. The girl who was ignored is gone. In her place stands a woman shaped by pain, driven by purpose, and empowered by love. The unbreakable bond between a daughter and her father's legacy is my foundation. It is the quiet strength beneath my uniform, the fire behind my eyes. It reminds me that no matter the odds, I carry not just my own hopes, but the dreams of a man who believed in something greater. So here I am, standing at the threshold of what's next, ready to face whatever comes with steady hands and a steady heart. Because I know who I am, I know where I come from, and I know where I'm going. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from us. This isn't just a story about loss or being ignored. It's about rising above, about taking the silence and turning it into your voice, about stepping into your own power when the world tries to keep you small. Agent Morrison's journey is far from over, but one thing is certain: she is ready. And so are you.